Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I've Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
All right. And welcome to another Monday Mini where we are going to be kind of sad, but try to be hopeful. Trigger warning, we're talking about elections. Trigger warning, we're in the state of Georgia, so we have a lot of mixed feelings. Is that the best way I could put this?
Yeah. Yeah, and we're recording this the Thursday after our U.S. Tuesday midterm elections that took place on November 8th, 2022. So there's still a lot of stuff up in the air. But yeah, there's been time to process some things.
So for those of you outside of the U.S. that might be watching, I saw one great meme about how Canadians are watching the elections, and it looks like it says on the one side voting for puppies and the other side voting for death. Essentially, it was really funny. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly right when it comes to how binary our system is, our democracy is. And there's a lot of things happening. We know this. Roe v. Wade has been overturned. There's lots of conversation. In this moment, there was a huge talk that it would be, what, quote unquote, a red wave. And if you're not familiar with the U.S. system, red is conservative, blue would be left-leaning. So you have this very, not even spectrum, according to our system. Individuals, yes. So there's a spectrum when it comes to political affiliation, and it's kind of died at this point. I feel like, you tell me if I'm wrong, because it seems all or none. So if you're voting for, especially in the state of Georgia, as our Senate race, we have 2 representatives that go in to our Senate Congress and represent our voices, and we have one Reverend Warnock, who is an incumbent, and then we have Herschel Walker, who was a football player. Honestly, I'm not being snide. That is his claim to fame. Mm-hmm. So I guess at least we can say he does have an education from the University of Georgia. There has been a lot of conversation about concussions and football players due to him. And it's been a funky race. But with that said, when you look at where Reverend Warnock sits and where Herschel Walker sits on the spectrum of politics, they are very extremes, essentially. I don't actually think Warnock is that extreme leftist, but because he is pro-abortion / pro-women's health care, he is seen that way. Because we have very single-focused issue voters here in the state, which is what we've seen. So, all that to say, I will give this to the country. They spoke up very loudly when they said, we are not against abortion. We think abortion is a right, and we don't think this should be taken away state by state by state. Even by the conservative states, they pushed back. There was not one single anti-abortion law that was allowed or voted for. So therefore, I think that's pretty clear, and I love to see it. We love to see it. That being said, we have representatives who have been elected who are anti-abortion. So go with that what you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do have a silver linings for the end of this, I will say. But I do think, like, this election, as we kind of discussed with Bridget in our recent episode, but it's nothing that was new or nothing that was a surprise to me. But it is really galling and disheartening to hear all of this rhetoric from supposedly, like, really Christian moral conservatives. Mm-hmm. But they're so, like, but we'll vote for Herschel Walker, even though there's all of this stuff, all of this evidence. And again, like, that doesn't surprise me. People do that. Like,
it's disappointing.
It's very, very disappointing. But it was kind of, I guess it was just such a stark reaffirmation of something I already knew.
Right.
That like, people are going to vote for somebody who's going to do what they want, even if it's like the complete antithesis of everything that they say.
They say that is good and why they feel this way. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes down to it, I am so upset to the point that I can't talk to my own family members because I'm scared to find out. I really hope they voted Libertarian just for the sake of voting Libertarian. Honestly, that would make me feel better. But I have a feeling that's not the case because the county that they lived in, it was like, I think, 98% supporting Herschel Walker.
Mm-hmm.
So there that is. And Herschel Walker, who has come out with being a womanizer, not taking care of his children, like several of his own children spoke up about that. The women filing charges against him for domestic violence and threatening their lives. All of these things. And the fact that that man is getting that far ahead and he is the opposite of what Christianity has been portrayed to me growing up, that them telling me this, versus this man who has dedicated his life as a pastor and leading a church and his family, that they would rather see this other dude just because of one single issue, which is what we say. And of course, there's this rhetoric. There's a lot of money that's been spent in this specific campaign and making sure that they let you know that they feel like Warnock is part of the reason for inflation, which again is a red herring to everything else, because we know how politics works, we know how finances work, and we know how pandemics work now, that this is obviously just a trick of the word. Like I hate the portrayal of Trump supporters, and I'm keeping it at Trump supporters because I don't know outside of that, as being really, really ignorant to everything and believing all of the lies because they needed to blame other people. My family are really intelligent people and honestly compassionate people, but they're listening to this rhetoric and believing it without any questioning, and I'm very surprised. At one point, I did say I was very excited to know that they voted for Kemp over David Perdue, who was at that point Trump-endorsed candidate, and they felt like Trump was too much and stayed away from him to go to Kemp. Kemp is seen as moderate in our state, which is absurd because he's also the one that's putting the 6-week ban for abortion, as well as bringing in the unborn rights laws to the state, which would literally imprison and charge women who may have to have abortions, even with miscarriages, because that's hard to define. Half the time. And then if they want to accuse that the miscarriage was on purpose, that's again, a whole different conversation. I'm very angry. Of murder, of actual murder and homicide. So there are all these things that I'm like, this dude is not, he's not moderate. He's not as extreme as Trump, but that is not moderate. I am having a hard time wrapping my mind around the fact that over 70-something% of white women voted for this man in the state. I'm having a hard time with the fact that at least 50% of Asian people have voted for this man. I want to throw hands. I am so upset and angry. Black women absolutely pulled in 120,000% when they shouldn't have had to. Of course they did. Of course they did, because that's what happens. Latino women actually were about the same as Asian women. They were pretty far back. We know that the Latino population in Miami-Dade actually pulled for DeSantis, which was kind of shocking. But also, again, we're going to have this bigger conversation because Val Demings, who was one of the Senate running in Florida, who should have been able to take it, as well as Stacey Abrams here in Georgia, the math doesn't math. Because when we see the amount of people who voted for Warnock, it was significantly less that voted for Stacey Abrams. So I'm very confused. He came in and said, yes, Warnock, no Abrams.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like that was a big part of this conversation of like, why couldn't you? They're similar in their policies. They're similar in their values. They're similar in their education. I don't understand, other than she's a woman, a Black woman. So what was the difference? And Val Demings kind of had that similar conversation that the statistics should not have been that big variation. What is it about Black women that you are scared of? But the Black women are the ones that continue to save us. This is a big conversation of misogynoir in politics, which we've had repeatedly, which we'll continue to have. I'm also very confused about the fact that in 2018, Stacey Abrams lost by 50,000. In 2022, she lost by about 300,000. So votes. So there's a lot of conversations we need to be having. Gerrymandering, 120,000% has a lot to do with what's happened here. Brian Kemp created this fallacy in the way he lined up the voters when he was a Secretary of State. We know this. We know that if it had remained, the likelihood of Stacey Abrams being elected then was pretty high. There's a lot of things that I'm very grossed out about. I know Stacey Abrams is a woman of honor and conceited and moved on and will continue to do, as she did last time, more work than she needs to for a system that doesn't appreciate her. Yeah. And I'm so upset. I'm still upset. With all of that said, as voters, you and I, who did vote for these things, who have campaigned, who have paid money, who've trying to see that this would happen, that we were trying to spread the message and try to crack down the misinformation, as what we do as podcasters. We've been ridiculed all over the reviews saying we're too left-leaning. And apparently at one point, someone said we love Stacey Abrams and too much. And we're like, don't start with us. Yes, we do. But like even with her campaign, there's conversations about whether or not Black men didn't step up, and that's not the case. This is white people. Sorry, I love y'all, but white people did this. In that conversation, because the amount of Black men who voted for Stacey Abrams was significantly higher than, again, the Asian and the Latino population as well. So that can't be a thing, which was a big rhetoric and falsehood that was being spread all over social media, that Black men were holding back women. That's not true in this scenario. There's so much that I'm trying to wrap my head around in this election. Glad to see that there's still a hold and it wasn't a big overturning of any of the Congress thus far, because we've got some things that are still up in the air. Boebert is up in the air right now. Cross your fingers. Unfortunately, Marjorie Taylor Greene is still here. So, there are things that is really disappointing to see, but then I'm trying to hold on to that hope. Again, with the abortion laws coming in, all the bills that came through and then was completely just smashed aside. Hopefully that will be a good platform to restore women's healthcare rights and women's rights in general. But there's so much in this that it's just beyond confusing. And then again, we have to remember who controls the narrative, as well as controls the money, as well as who is relining districts and why and what this looks like. And now there's a whole conversation about trying to up the age of voters, legal age of voters to 21, because they're so upset that these Gen Zers showed up and really pushed to where we are. Thank God, thank you, because they understand what is happening. They see it. They've seen these awful injustices that have happened as of the past 5 years more so, and realize this is a problem. And I love to see it. And they're listening, and social media has given them access that we've never had before, both good and bad, obviously. But it's amazing. I love that. I love that they are going to age out some of this awful, just gross narrative, racist narratives, as well as unjust narratives. I love to see that. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it's things like that. And as we discussed in previous episodes, I was heartened, even though it was kind of gilded with sadness, that I saw so many people show up for this election. Even in my own friend group, who maybe didn't used to vote in midterms, were like, no, absolutely, I'm not going to not vote. I am happy to see that. It is disheartening that, so much of the will of the people is being ignored because of how our political system works. So if, a majority of the U.S. does support abortion and women's or people with uteruses right to choose, and yet where people get elected even though they got less votes, and they're the ones that are making these systems, and they're making it impossible for us to, by gerrymandering or restricting voter rights or whatever, making it impossible for us to get them out of office. So it's really, really frustrating. And I do think you're right that there's a huge level of of misogynoir and also just like real sexism. I think people are just like weird about voting for women, to be honest. Like they always have some reason, like, oh, she doesn't. Like I'm making a face you can't see, but you would recognize it if you could see it. It's like,
there's this hesitation.
Yeah.
They're like, well, and to be honest, what was happening with when Stacey Abrams originally ran the primary in 2018, she ran against a white woman. White women were all about this one white woman. The minute Stacey Abrams won that primary, instead of coming around and saying, okay, we'll vote for her, they're like, we're not voting. And I've heard many, and these are the boomer generations. Not all boomers. I know this. I know this. I know y'all are amazing. And I say this as I'm right behind y'all, essentially. But like, it was this group. And I like personally knew some people that did that. And the shock in my face, I'm like, what? Because your white woman candidate did not win. You're not going to vote at all. And you would rather have Brian Kemp, who was obviously not for the interest of women. He's interested about family, and we'll talk about that in itself and what he means by family, those very heteronormative Christian nationalist idea of family to prevail. And again, we got episodes, y'all, upon episodes coming up about that, but that they would rather allow that to happen because they are, I don't know if it's bitter, they're being petty in the worst sense, and that now we're here.
Yeah.
But all of that to say is like it's good to see that generational thinking hopefully is about to be pushed out. No offense. Again, I'm going to get called ageist, but I'm sorry. When it comes to white women, it's not pretty. It's not pretty when it comes to these statistics, and I'm just talking about statistics. And for those of y'all, Anney, you too, who did vote for the cause for women, essentially, for those with uteruses, for the queer people, like all of these things, for those disenfranchised and marginalized, then that's amazing. But what we need to do is have this conversation of why is this percentage looking like this and what is wrong? Because there's people, the majority voted for a single issue, and I don't know whether it was racist issues or whether it was critical thinking, which is racist, by the way, or whether it was abortion issues. Those were the things that I don't, what was it? Or maybe it was just an ideal of something, or maybe, again, it may be like Brian Kemp to them was centrist / modern Republican, which is... Again, not true. As well as maybe for when it comes to Warnock, they're like, hey, I'm not racist. I'm voting for a black man.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard when I was much younger, actually, I think when I was first starting to vote, somebody told me something that has greatly disturbed me, but I think it's true. People will just vote for the name that they recognize. And if they aren't familiar or they're more familiar with one, that's the one they'll go with. So a lot of times, like, oh, well, this is the incumbent. I don't know too much about this other person. I will do this. And that's what scares me about our whole the whole like celebrity culture that's coming up with politics.
Right.
It really
which is what's
makes me
happening.
anxious.
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah.
Because that's what we were talking about with even with Abrams and Kemp. Their education, their experience, it doesn't match up. Again, what we talked about with the justices, it's the same line. Like the education experience are not matching up of what you have to prove versus what people want to see. So what I mean is like white men, white cis men, cool. You don't need to show me anything else. Cool. You don't even have to show me that you're not a criminal.
Right.
Just cool.
Oh, God.
Which is what we've seen. But for black women, you have to go above and beyond to prove that you are more than qualified. And then maybe even then, I don't like what you did.
Right. There's just something about you.
Right. And that's the, oh my God, that's just something I don't trust. I just knew there was something off. When I hear that statement, I already know you're capping about something. And I'm like,
Yeah, it infuriates me. Okay.
Yeah. You're just say you're racist. Just say you're sexist. Just say you're an ass. Just say that. Please. I'm going to go back to the fact that our younger listeners, if we have younger listeners, I hope we do. Are we that outdated? Oh.
I don't think
Younger
so.
generation, let me know if you're listening to us. The powers that be today are afraid of you, and that is a beautiful thing to see. I love everything about that, because the fact they're talking about changing the voting age to 21 instead of 18, which originally was changed in the 70s, because people were like, hey, if we can go to war,
right,
then we can freaking vote, which is absolutely, you should be able to do so. Let's talk about taxation without representation. The fact that I was taxed at 14 and I had no rights, but I had a job. What? That's a whole different conversation. But all of that, not that I want a 14-year-old voting. I don't want that. But I'm just saying, we need to have this bigger conversation about what equality truly looks like and equity should be. And age could be a thing. But the fact that the 18 to 21-year-olds, the 18 to 27-year-old, honestly, has gotten this much power and this much voice is beautiful to see. I love that that's something that we can celebrate. I love that we can come and celebrate that, yeah, abortion should be a fundamental right, and that we should have a conversation about women's healthcare in general, point blank, about what is needed, what is happening with sexuality in general. And again, I need to come back and say not just women, but people with uteruses having a right to access and being able to have free conversations about what access looks like and what sexual health looks like beyond just what we can't do. Again, so there are some things that I am really excited about. Again, being in Georgia right now feels really glum. As I would say it, like I definitely cried, because what I hear when I see people vote for Kemp and vote for Walker is how little they care about half of their population and how little they give a damn about whether or not we can be healthy and happy and free. And that just shows that they are more willing to trust a man who has obvious head trauma, which like people are using as an excuse. Again, there's things that we need to have a conversation about, but his talking about his mental health, but without any actual help behind it, like this is not helpful. Talking about mental health is not necessarily a fix, especially when you say, I go to church. That's not a fix. And we need to have, and if your mental health is causing you to threaten your baby mama with a gun, we need to have that conversation about why this is not a good place for him to be in leadership. And excusing himself and giving excuses instead of apologizing and taking responsibility, man, there's just layers to that. And that's how little you care about those with uteruses in your state. Wow.
Yeah, it's really, it sucks. And I've talked about that before with when Donald Trump was elected. That was like it was a very dark time for me because of that very same thought. Like, oh God, what are you telling me then? We're going to a runoff, it looks like. So we're going to be dealing with the very horrible political ads, especially around trans people, by the way. Extremely offensive coming out of the Walker campaign. So we have that to look forward to. I will say, and this is like a very small silver lining, but it is a silver lining to me. There was no red wave, really. I thought there would be. I was expecting to wake up and be like, oh my God. And I didn't. And like, you know, people never thought Boebert would be in danger, whether she wins or not. Like, they never thought she would be in danger of losing her seat, but she is. I hope she does. And also, like, and I hate this, but it's true. Growing up in Georgia, I never thought we would be in this. I never thought it would be this close at all.
Right.
And I hate that. And there are people who have been working and organizing and making this happen. And they've been there forever, and we should definitely recognize them. But I just didn't, this is something I'm surprised and very happy to see, even though it does suck still.
Right. I will say we did see our first lesbian governor. Love that. First chosen woman governor for New York. Love to see that. First trans house, I believe. I forgot where they're from, but it was a beautiful thing to see in their area. Love to see our first Gen Zer down in Florida. Love that. So there's a lot to celebrate. Really trying. Again, we're in Georgia. It's really hard for us to focus in Georgia here in Atlanta. And yes, Atlanta is very different from outside of. But again, yeah, things are changing. And gerrymandering has caused a lot of problems. And we need to have that conversation about how do we make it a true democracy? Because it feels like it's no longer a true democracy. And that's it's hard to see. But yes, good things are happening. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about this in December as the runoffs are happening as well for many people, not just us. And yeah, for those who are in states like we are, we see you. We know you're heartbroken as well. For those who are able to celebrate, we celebrate with you. Thank God. Just a reminder for those of you who are celebrating and we want to celebrate with you, putting down people that are in situations that they cannot help and wish we could. I think we had a conversation when I first met Bridget, who was talking about the fight she had in D.C. and doing some amazing work and how it would be difficult to come to a different place to restart the fight. So we were talking about, hey, you should come to Atlanta. And she was like, oh, God, y'all are going through some things. And I think this was before the 2018 election, if I remember, or maybe right as it was happening and things were changing. And like, yeah, it's hard. It's hard trying to go from complete dark red to purple to trying to push blue because we're still in that purple area. The fact that we are a swing state is so new and phenomenal to us that we'd love to see it. And yes, it is because of our Black community who's really pushed that. And we are very grateful. And other people of color, but yeah, Black women have been here. That it's a fight. And remember that it's like for those who are fighting and we are fighting, it feels hopeless. To be beat down on doesn't help.
Yeah. It really, really doesn't. And I honestly, like, not to place blame, there's like a million things happening here, but it is kind of going back to something we talked about in a recent episode that was much sillier and not as serious, but it is kind of similar, I think, where if the like media message is, oh, this place is backwards, they'll never do this, then I think people internalize that message, and some people will be like, "Oh yeah, okay, so I shouldn't go vote." Or, yeah, exactly. Like, and again, that there's so many other. I'm not placing blame. I'm just saying that is. I think I've heard that from people before, where they're like, "Well, it doesn't matter, so why should I?" And clearly, it does. Like, I never thought I'd see this. I never thought we would be in Georgia in a position where maybe we could, And again, as you said, that's thanks to the work of like mostly Black women, people who have been organizing and pushing and doing this. But yeah, it doesn't help if the whole media narrative is like everyone there. We don't. We're like, there are people, and I also kind of don't want to necessarily excuse them, but it does, that you can internalize that, especially when you're young. Like, oh, okay, it doesn't matter, so I won't vote.
Right.
And it does matter. So, yeah.
And I've seen those young people. They're the ones who go out there working too.
Yes.
The canvassers. Yes. So again, youngins, love you.
We do. We do.
Love us.
We do. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. I know we're going to come back and revisit this in the future. But for any listeners, if you have any exciting, happy news to share from elections in your area, or even on the opposite end of things that we should be looking out for, or, your experience in helping people organize or canvass or whatever it was, we would love to hear from you. Our email is stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram at Stuff One Never Told You. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina.
Thank you, Christina.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff One Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.